we're ready to get started. So first of all, we want to welcome everyone to the first 7 Streams webinar. This is the first in a series of webinars we're going to be doing twice a month throughout this year, exclusively for folks who are in our Copreneur group. So welcome to the webinar. I'm Dedric Polite. This is my beautiful, talented wife, Krystal Polite. We are Be Polite Properties. Be Polite is our trade name all of our businesses are under. So we have a special guest tonight that's going to be talking about setting up your business and your entity structure. So before I jump into that, Krystal, you want to do a little quick intro about the group and how it came about? Yep.
So just so a lot of you guys know, we started the Copreneur group just so couples that are in entrepreneurship have a place to kind of like fellowship, bounce ideas off each other, bounce businesses off each other. So that's really why we created that community, but also to help each other in our marriages. A lot of people, one of the questions that we get the most when we're out and traveling and speaking is, how do you work with your spouse? Like, I've tried and I just cannot seem to get my husband or my wife on the same page. How do you guys do it? It's literally one of the most popular questions that we have. So we also created it for it to be a community for people to be able to come. And I tell a lot of people, like, hey, I would love for my wife to be able to, see other people doing this so that she can see us in them. And I tell them, listen, the group is the perfect place for that, because she'll get to see other couples as well. So that's really why we created the group. So just so you guys know a little bit about how I came into contact with Sabine, we were actually at another real estate seminar in, where were we at?
DC,
yeah. DC. Yeah. And it was a Earn Your Leisure event. We were there supporting a sister of ours, speaking. We'd all went out to eat. And I think that was the first time you and I met, right? When we went to eat that day. Yeah. We went to eat at a horrible restaurant.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that. But it was a great company. So right. We were sitting across from Sabine and her husband.
Yes. And did I tell y'all that restaurant was horrible? When I tell you it was so disgusting, it was disgusting. But the company alone, everyone who was at that table was amazing people doing amazing things right now in business. So we were sitting across from Sabine and her husband, and I was telling her about one of the series that we're about to launch for 2020. And I just so happened to tell her, I was like, yeah, I said, I want to start off with entity structure. I said, because so many people say, oh, yeah, we're in business. And then I tell them to break down their business, and they don't have a business because
they have a hobby or a
side
hustle.
A side hustle, which is great, but it's only going to start. It's only going to take you so far. So I said, right now I'm looking for someone who can teach entity structure to copreneurs. And she was like, oh, well, I have an entire presentation on entity structure, setting it up. Her company also, she's an attorney, so her law firm also sets it up. So there's something for everyone. Yes. And she's going to teach you guys. Because for ones like us, we did the do-it-yourself. And then once we got a little money in the bank, when we get a little money in the bank,
hire somebody.
We was like, here you go. We're going to pass the baton to someone who's an expert at it. Right. But she really breaks it down, and you're going to see all of that today, guys, on how to set up your entity structure. So anything else?
Yeah. Just to add to it, again, it can be complicated setting up your LLC, your C Corp. I know when I first looked at it, I was like, I don't even know where to start. Like, what type of entity should I set up? What paperwork do I fill out? It's very complicated, and it's not something we're taught in school, right? You're not taught how to set up LLCs and C Corps and S Corps and all this stuff. Right. But it's definitely something that's important. Like my wife said, when you have a business, you want to have it set up properly, because you can get things like business credit, right? If your business is set up properly, you can qualify for certain things as a business that's a true business. And again, we all started this probably as side hustles, but now we want to help you guys graduate to true business people. with your entity set up properly. So again, we'll introduce Sabine. She's an attorney. She's also an investor, invests in real estate and other things. She's a mom. She's a co-preneur. So without any further ado, Sabine Franco.
Let Sabine take it over.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, guys. It was such a pleasure to meet you guys and to see all what you were doing. You guys are an inspiration in yourselves. So I was super honored to be a part of your venture. So I'm going to share and then presenter view. How is that? How is that? You see my slide?
Yep, I can see it. Can everyone see her slides?
Let's put yes if you can see her screen.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Cool. All right, so who am I? Like Dedric so kindly have already told you, I'm a mom, a wife, a lawyer. I own my own practice. I've been practicing for law for 7 years, and I'm based out of New York and New Jersey. So there are certain things that I can do only in those states, but for the purposes of this webinar, I do business formations in all states as well as trademarks in all states, because for business formations, it's not limited. And for trademarks, it's federal law. So every attorney can practice federal law, which is all states, right? So I'm also an entrepreneur. So I do have a passion to help entrepreneurs, because it's such a grind when you first start out and you don't really know how to navigate everything. So, and that's pretty much it. I'll just, a quick backstory. I went to law school because I was tired of the jobs that I had, and I just kept switching jobs. I was about 24, and I was kind of like, I need to know what I'm doing in my life, and I couldn't figure it out. I was making decent money, but it just wasn't enough. I wasn't fulfilled. And I always had like in the back of my mind, like, oh, I want to be a lawyer. I didn't quite know why, and I didn't know much about, you know, being a lawyer, but I just went for it anyway. And, you know, a couple years later, I was done. It was a long journey, because I didn't come from, you know, other people in my family being lawyers. I didn't come from, you know, kind of, you know, having a silver spoon. So I really had to just figure things out along the way, and going against these other students who, like, you know, came from these big universities. But, you know, God pulled me through, and I was able to make it through that process. And I went out on my own, because when I first graduated, I was working for a firm at a temporary job. And then I got pregnant with my daughter. So after that job ended, I said, you know what, I'm going to try to go out on my own. And I did. You know, I did what I knew. Real estate transactions is what I knew, because I, prior to law school, worked at a mortgage company. So I was able to kind of pick that up real quick, and then just organically things came my way. And along the way, I got to figure out what I like, what I don't like, and that's how I shaped my practice. All right, so that's me. And enough about me, let's get into it. Okay, so what we'll talk about today is I'll explain the entity types to you guys, and then we'll talk about which type of business should you choose for what you're looking to get into, what type of venture you know, you're in. So I'll give you like an overview and kind of how you can try to figure that out on your own. And so that's the trick to help you come up with that decision. And then I'll talk a little bit about the forms that you're going to need. Some of them, you know, you'll come across, but and some of them you won't. So I just want you to have a good clear-cut outline of what you actually need. Okay. So the business entity types that I have here are, you probably heard of a lot of them: sole proprietorship, partnership, LLCs, C corporations, and there's also C corporations taxed as an S-Corp, which I'll talk about, and then non-for-profit companies or corporations. So the sole proprietorship is probably what most of you are actually going through if you've already started your business and you haven't done anything, right? It's the easiest type, and it's not an entity, it's a business type, right? So it's the easiest type of business because you don't have to start anything, you don't have to file anything. It's basically you on your own, right? That's just you starting out roughing it. Now, if you want to be more official and you want to open up a bank account and you want to, you know, have some sort of structure, then you need to probably register, not probably, but you need to register with your county. So your county will have, whatever county that you're in will have like a form that you need to fill out and probably pay a fee somewhere between $10 and $100 stating that you're doing business, right? And some of you might have heard of a DBA. Like, what is a DBA? I've heard, do I need a DBA? I get questions like that. Do I need a DBA? So a DBA is just doing business as. So if you wanted to just have a business in your own name, say like Krystal Polite, just doing business as Krystal Polite, you don't need a DBA. Some states, depending on where you are, and some counties will require you to have it, but most of the time you don't even need it. But if you don't want to do business under your own name, which you probably shouldn't, or I would say that you shouldn't, you can get a DBA and say, although you're not formed like an LLC or Corp, but Krystal Polite wants to be polite, right? So you want to be doing business as Be Polite, and you don't really want to form. So you would get a DBA, which means you're doing business as. And again, that's going to vary by county, where your county, the counties that you're in. It's not a state thing. It's not a statewide thing. So you'll have to get it wherever you're operating. So for instance, in New York, just for example, if I were to do a DBA, I need to do it in every single county, which is annoying if you're doing business in every single county, because then it could be a couple $100 and it could cost you more than forming a business, right? A business entity, which I'll explain the difference. Partnership is also not a business entity, but it's a business type, right? The partnership is like two sole proprietors, basically, or two individuals coming together to do business together. And you don't need to form anything for that, but you do need a partnership agreement. And so the partnership agreement is what's going to tell you, who owns what are the responsibilities of each party, what happens if, if one of you want to leave, what happens if one of you want to, give away your ownership or, your rights, your position in the business. So a partnership agreement is generally a must. The reason why I don't necessarily like partnerships is because it doesn't protect you from each other, right? So I say it's like a marriage because it's like a free for all. So if you weren't married and say you just had your friend that you wanted to form a partnership with, it's very risky because you're open to whatever liability that person brings. So say for instance, that person steals money or does some type of fraud as it relates to a client, you would be liable just the same. And that would mean all your personal assets are opened up for that liability also. So for that particular reason, I don't love partnerships, right? Because they don't give you any liability protection from each other. And it's not really like a structure. So when I mean it's not a structure, is that one, that part of not having liability protection, and two, the income that comes in both flows to each of you. So it's basically like 50-50, which that's not a bad part of it. So the income that comes in is for each of you 50-50, and that goes to your own personal tax returns. You guys are with me? Okay. So now the difference now, where I was saying how these were business types, which is a sole proprietorship and a partnership, the rest of them are entities, which means that they basically can hold your business. I'm going to go to the next slide for a minute. All right. So a business entity is an organization, or organization created by one or more people to carry out business, right? And it's registered with your state. So the state recognizes it. Once you have a name that's registered with the state, that covers the whole entire state. You don't have to register with any particular counties. And you can, if you wanted a DBA, you could still do business under a different name, but you don't have that same requirement where now you have to register in every single county like you did with just your local business. Okay, so a business entity is a container that houses your business. So basically your business lives within that entity. So whatever property you have in that business, whatever, your furniture, your whatever assets you have, all of that lives within that business entity. And it's fictitious. It's like made up. It's like you're thinking of it as something that's like a box that lives outside of you or an alter ego outside of you. That's what it is. It's taxed separately from you. It has a separate EIN, which is just like your social security number. It's an employee identification number. So it's separate and a part of you. It lives outside of you. It has separate tax benefits than you would, right? It has more favorable or better tax benefits than you would. They're different, but they're better than what you have as an individual or a sole proprietor. And then it can do basically anything that you can do. So it could buy, it could sell, it could enter into contracts, it can, own things. So that's what makes it different from like your sole proprietorship or your partnership. And so, we'll go into the first one, which is your LLC. So most people hear about LLCs all the time, right? It's a limited liability company. And what makes it so attractive is that it's kind of like the best of both worlds, where it has some characteristics of a sole proprietorship. It has some characteristics of a corporation. So it's become like it's the newest form of entity, but it's become the most attractive because it allows you to do so much. And so what it is that it gives you, for all of the individuals who are part of the limited liability company, it gives you liability protection. So that means that if there's a lawsuit, you're only at risk up to what's in the business, right? So that means that it does not go to your own personal assets. So your bank account, your home, your stocks, all that stuff is not going to be affected by something that happens within the business because you have that liability protection. Not only that, if the other members, which the owners of an LLC, we call them members, right? So each owner is a member. So I know sometimes people say, well, I'm the CEO. Well, if you have an LLC, you're not really the CEO because that's not a title that lives within an LLC, right? Although it sounds sexy, we love it, you can still say it, but it's just not a legal function of an LLC. So each owner of an LLC is a member, right? You can also have managers, and that's basically, so here's how it works. So each owner is already a member. What you need to have for your LLC is called an operating agreement. And your operating agreement is basically gonna, similar to the partnership agreement, it's gonna say how you're going to run the company, right? How you're gonna make decisions. Do you need to have meetings? Do you not need to have meetings? What percentage of vote do you need to make certain decisions? Again, if somebody's going to leave, what do you do with their share? Can they just sell their ownership? So that's what your operating agreement is going to say in the for the LLC, right? So I just lost my train of thought. Okay, so it's limited liability. When it comes to your partners, you're not liable for something that they do, right? So say your partner does fraud, and somebody sues your partner for fraud. They're basically not going to sue you and your own personal assets. They're going to sue the company. So yes, the company will be at risk, but you're safe, right? Your own personal assets are safe. And that's important too, because say your partner, God forbid, gets into a car accident and kills somebody, right? And they get sued personally, the business won't be affected. So it protects you on both sides. And that's why the limited liability is kind of attractive, that having that liability protection is attractive. You don't need specific officers for an LLC, which means it could be just the members, or it could be managers as well. So what happens is with the LLC is automatically your members, but you could assign somebody to manage. So you know how some businesses you have where say you have investors that want to invest in the business with you, but you want to do the day-to-day and you want to make all the decisions. So in that situation, you would appoint a manager, and that would be in your operating agreement, right? That's where you would appoint that manager. So that's a good function of an LLC too, where people could invest with you. You can have silent partners, but then you could appoint a manager, which could be yourself. And that way you can do all the day-to-day decisions, but you have other people who's also invested in the business. And it's easy to kind of distribute ownership or funds because, like, say, for instance, you get money. I'll use real estate as an example. You buy a property, you have some silent investors. You can give them interest in that LLC, but you're the manager. And you could set out exactly what percentage of ownership everybody has. So you're doing, making all the decisions the flip, you know, who you're going to hire and what's going on with the flip and when you're going to sell and what that price point is and everything like that. And then when you get the money, it's easy to just distribute it according to everybody's ownership percentage, which it gets a little bit more dicey with a corporation because of, you know, the shares and all of that. Is this good? Are you guys getting it? Okay. All right. So, so that's why LLCs are attractive. It's easy. You don't need a lot of paperwork with LLCs. So you don't have to have monthly meetings unless you decide to have them. You don't have to, you know, like I said, it doesn't matter how many owners you want to have or how many individuals you want to have. I will say one thing with LLCs, it's good to have multiple members in an LLC because what happens is if, for instance, you are to get sued, so this limited liability protection is not blanket, right? You do have to run the business in an appropriate way in order for it to be sort of like solid. For, say, for instance, if there was a lawsuit or something and the courts were to look at your business, they want to see that you're actually running it like an actual business, right? They want to see that you have bank accounts for the business. So you need to have a bank account for the business. They want to see that you have funds in the business. So there's money in the business that could actually run the day-to-day operations of the business and not that you're taking all of the funds out as soon as they come in. So you want to think about that. How much money do I need to leave in the business to kind of, you know, run the day-to-day? I know it happens when you're starting out. There's probably not much you could do about it because, you know, you need the funds to do whatever you need to do with them. But to the extent that you can, and as you're growing your business, just know this is something that you want to look forward to try to keep some funds in the business to kind of run the operations. And then you want to have your paperwork in order. You want to have your operating agreement, you know, for your business, and you want to know who the members are and what percentage of ownership they have. So that's just some things that you want to do, because if you don't, and say, for instance, there is a lawsuit, the courts can look to what's called pierce the corporate veil. And that means they want to go through the business to get to you. So that's why you got to keep those formalities so that you're not, you know, still opening yourself to risk. And then also understand that when you're a married couple and you own an LLC, they tend to look at you as one person. Right? So when you're taxed, you're going to be taxed as one. And so when you can add other members. So you might want to think about adding your children to that entity because that's an additional person and that's not part of your union. You can add your children, doesn't matter how old they are or how young they are, I should say. And you can give them, you know, a certain percentage, like 5% or whatever it is. And that's another way that you can gift to your children during your lifetime without affecting your, it's like your lifetime allowance to give tax-free. So for instance, this is a little bit off topic, but I'll say it anyway. When you pass away, you'll have an estate tax. And that estate tax is like right now for federal, it's like $11.5 million. And for state, it's like $5.5 million. And so what happens is when you pass away, you have an estate tax. So anything above that amount will get taxed, right? But now if your children are part of your business entity, you can start giving them or transferring more of the interest in that business entity during your lifetime so that when it's time for you to pass or whatever the case is, that doesn't fall within your complete estate. So it makes it less in a sense. Hope that's not too complex. I just wanted to throw that in there. Okay, so we talked about LLCs and why they're good. So it gives you limited liability, not a lot of paperwork to keep up with. You get that protection. It is a business structure. Oh, in an LLC you get taxed only once. So when I talk about corporation, I'll tell you the difference with that. Corporations, you get taxed twice. So you get taxed on the business and you get taxed on your personal income. With an LLC, that income just flows through to you. So you don't do a separate tax return for your LLC. It goes on your personal tax return, right? When you go to your accountant or your CPA at the end of the year, you say, I have an LLC. They're going to do whatever they do. And whatever that income is, they'll put it on your personal income tax, right? And so if you have a partner and you're married, it's going to go on your joint return. If you guys file separate for whatever reason, it will, depending on your ownership interest, whether it be 50-50 or otherwise, it will go to your respective returns. Okay. So C corporations. So C corporations are, which is what you know of as a corporation. Those are also a business entity. It gives you liability protection also. So again, if you're sued, the business is not affected for a lawsuit that you would have, and you're not affected by a lawsuit that the business would have. And it's just not just lawsuits, it's also debts or anything like that. Does not affect you, so it keeps that separation. The main difference between an LLC and a C Corp is that taxing that I talked to you about. And then a C Corp is also not as attractive for a certain type of investments. Like for instance, for real estate, if you're flipping, it's okay to do a C Corp. But if you're like buying and holding, it's most likely you don't want to have a C Corp, because it's not easy to move properties out of a C corporation. For instance, if you have a property that you're holding and say you want to transfer it to another entity or you want to do something else, you will get taxed on it. So when it comes to C corporations, it's sort of like you want to be careful with what type of asset you have or what type of business you have in it. And they tend to be more expensive, more burdensome, only because you got to have officers. So you have to have, your CEO, your president, your vice president, your secretary, your treasurer. It can be one and the same, but you're supposed to, keep monthly, or not necessarily monthly, but at least you have to keep annual meeting minutes. So if you're making decisions for the company, you have to have a meeting and write that down. If it's only you, then it's like, okay, you're really just writing it down, but these are the things that you're supposed to do to keep up a corporation. And then, so the most unattractive thing about it is that double tax. So if you don't want to have all that burden, if there's no particular reason why you need a C corporation, then you want to stay away from it. So some reasons why I say you would, say for instance, you're building an app and your goal is to be like a Facebook or Instagram or any other type of app, Uber, and you know that you're going to want to go public someday, which means you're going to want to be on the stock exchange, et cetera, and sell your shares, then you want to think about starting as a C Corp, because it's easier. You don't have to switch it over later. So if you know that the long-term goal for your company is that you want to do that, then you would think about doing a C Corp. But if not, then maybe you don't want to go that route. Okay. So now there's also something called an S-Corp, which some of you might have heard of. So an S-Corp is not a separate type of business entity, right? It's actually the way that you're taxed by the IRS. So you can be an LLC taxed as an S-Corp, or you could be a C Corp taxed as an S-Corp. And what does that S-Corp mean? It's basically, for C Corps, it means that you can be taxed only once. So remember how I said that those C corporations, you are taxed on the business entity level and on your personal income level. So now if you tell the IRS that I would like to be taxed as an S-Corp, you'll only be taxed on your personal income and not on the business and your personal income. But there are limitations with that. So you can only have only up to 100 shareholders, which with a regular C Corp, you can have as many millions or whatever shareholders. So that may not be so bad for you as a small business. You're like, okay, so what? It's just me and a couple of people, so it's not a big deal. But then you also can't have foreign investors. So you cannot have, say for instance, you have, now that the world is getting smaller, you could feasibly own a business as a small business with someone overseas. You can't do that in an S-Corp, right? And then you still have all the documentation that you need to keep in the same manner as a C Corp. Now, when people have LLCs and they're doing real estate, I say if you wanted to have corporation, do an LLC tax as an S-Corp, because later on, if you decide that you don't want to have that S-Corp, you could take that off. But it's like, you got to follow the time frame. So that would be something that you would discuss with your accountant. I don't want to get too confused with that, right? So a C Corp, we have the LLC, we have the C Corp, and then S Corp is how you are taxed by the IRS. So that's what makes that That's what makes that distinction, right? And okay, where I'm at. So now I'm going to talk about a nonprofit corporation. So sometimes people ask, should they be a nonprofit? They don't know if they should be a nonprofit. So the difference with all of these other business entities and a nonprofit is that a nonprofit, you are not actually an owner of a nonprofit, right? So a nonprofit is created for the public. It's created for like the greater good. So there are certain things that you can't do in a nonprofit that you could do in a regular business. For instance, you can actually be voted out of your nonprofit as a board member, right? So if you started, say for instance, your views are not in line with what the company's views are now, and the existing board members decide to vote you out. That is a way that they could do that. However, what's most attractive about a nonprofit is if you really do have a public or charity goal or charitable goal, it's so easy to get funding. You know, if you obtain what's called 501c3 taxation or 501c3 benefit, which means that the IRS has now said you do not need to pay taxes based upon the type of business that you are. And so, and that they really only do this for nonprofit companies or corporations, right? So, and there are a bunch of other types where it's like hybrid. You could be half profit, half nonprofit. But for the most part, you need to have like a charitable goal or a public benefit goal. And in that situation, you form the business and then you get 501c3 designation from the IRS where they say, okay, you don't have to pay taxes. And that's how these organizations are so easy to get money from big corporations as donations when they have that 501c3. Why is that? Because those actual organizations get to write off all of those donations. So that's why they almost have to do it, because they make so much money that they have to give it away so that they can have the tax write-off. That's one of the major benefits of a nonprofit, is because you can now get donations to help, further your cause. But I just like people to understand that it's not a business that you're essentially owning. It's something you're creating that you become a part of, but it's not yours. You know what I mean? Because, you have to follow so many rules, and there's no shares or membership interest in a nonprofit. You become part of the board, so you make the decisions, but there's no shareholders. So there's no owners, really. Okay. All right. So we talked about that. And so what type of business entity should you choose, right? We have all these options, and you're like, well, I'm not sure. Should I be an LLC? Should I be an S-Corp? Maybe I should be a nonprofit. I don't know. So I want to help you think about these 4 major things that you want to consider when you are deciding what type of entity should you be. So you want to think, does my business require me to have liability protection? Am I concerned that I'm going to be sued by someone? Do I foresee that there's some type of issue or hazard that could be caused by my business? Like, for instance, if you have employees or you have anyone working for you, you probably want to make sure you have liability protection when you're deciding which entity to choose, because employees can sue you. Or if you have a physical business, you can get sued sued by visitors to your business, right? So if you have visitors coming and going to your establishment, you want to think about having liability protection, right? Sometimes, so you may think, okay, if I get sued, then maybe I'll just, close my business or whatever it is, or I don't have anything for them to take, right? I don't have assets for them to take, so I don't really need liability protection. I could do a sole proprietorship. Now, if you were to get sued and there's a judgment against you, which means, it was decided and the person who sued you was decided in their favor, and they were awarded an amount to collect against you. And you're like, well, I don't have anything, so it doesn't matter, right? So now those judgments can last over time. Right? They don't expire just because they can't collect against you today. So one day you may have something for them to take, and then it could then attach to that. One day you'll buy a house. One day you'll have, something of value for them to take. So you don't want to have judgments just living out there. I would say that you should choose an entity structure that gives you liability protection just in case. Anything can happen, scenarios that we can't even think of, you know? So another thing to think about is insurance. So you may be thinking, well, do I need liability protection when I could just get insurance for my company? Well, you should have insurance anyway, right? We always want to have insurance because it could prevent you from actually losing what's inside of your business. It could prevent you from, going, bankrupt within your business because your insurance will protect you. However, insurance is not as guaranteed as liability protection because insurance companies, they create policies and their goal is to not have to pay out on these policies. Their goal is to find a way to not have to pay you for the issues that arise. So that could be them finding you to be a part of the reason why that issue occurred, like what we call contributory negligence, so that you were negligent or in some part of the process you were at fault. So they look for loopholes. So I wouldn't say rely solely on insurance because to me, it's not good enough. So 2, your business goals. You want to think about your business goals. Am I growing this business to just have this business for long term? Am I growing this business to sell? Am I growing this business to go public, like I talked about? Like, is this, what am I doing with this business? Then you want to think about asset protection. Do I have goods? Do I have property? What services do I have? How am I, what am I trying to protect here? So that's another point that you want to look at. And then the types of income that you're getting, that you're receiving within your business is going to depend on what type of business you're getting. So this is a good way. So what is your business, right? So this is a good way to come up with how should I be, what type of business entity should I choose? So I typically say, don't go with sole proprietorship and don't go with partnership. That's just me. You don't have to take, my advice for it. But so when I'm advising people, I usually say, are we looking at an LLC or are we looking at a corporation or an S-Corp? Unless we're talking nonprofit, then that's a whole different conversation, right? But generally, this is how you would decide how to choose your entity. Are you in a service industry, right? Are you like a mechanic or a plumber or a restaurant or some type of business that provides a service, a barbershop? Those type of businesses are active businesses, right? So those type of businesses would be better for you to choose a corporation, which I say go S-Corp if you're small, do a corporation tax as an S-Corp, because what that's going to do for you, it's going to save you on self-employment tax. So what happens is when you have these type of businesses, if all of the income that comes within the business, if you're taxed on all of that, you're going to be paying a lot of tax. You're going to be taxed as a higher rate. Now, if you are an S-Corp, what happens is you only get taxed on the income that you take as personal income, not all the income that comes in the business, but income that goes to you, to your pocket, right? The rest of that income doesn't get that additional, what's called the 15% self-employment tax. So you're saving on that, right? It's hard to kind of digest it in, on the first go around, but just know that you're saving on taxes for that. Now, I say that the passive type of businesses. So these are businesses like if you're buying and holding real estate, if you have, royalties, if you wrote a book and your book is just, constantly selling itself. If you're doing, marketing, like social media marketing for somebody, those type of things are somewhat passive. And because of that, it would be better to do an LLC. Within an LLC, you're not concerned about that self-employment tax because it's not considered that type of income. Is considered capital gains, right? And on capital gains, you don't have self-employment tax. So that LLC, that easier type of entity, is the better route to go for that, right? So I just put Y. So basically for active, it's because of the taxes and you save on self-employment tax. And for passive, you don't have that issue. It's only capital gains, and that's the better type of entity for you for that. I'm sure you have questions. So, and then another thing to consider is the cost factor. So In some states, you're required, when you start an LLC, you're required to publish. So you're required to put it in a newspaper. Only this crazy old New York who wants to have you guys do everything extra under the sun. Nebraska and Arizona are the only states you have to publish. So if you're not in one of those states, then just know that that LLC publication exists. It's one time, but it could be a couple $100s, so that if you're just starting out, that might be a deciding factor. And you want to look into, based upon your state, what you have to pay annually for your business entity. So you can usually search that on your state's website. Like for New York, it's newyorkstate.gov. For any other state, it's usually like your .gov or your your state's business page. They usually have that information on there. So how much do I have to pay annually for that? Or you could speak to your accountant. How much do I have to pay for this business? And the type of business that you're running. So think about the costs involved in that. What forms do you need? So if you're talking about these two type of entities, so for your sole proprietorship, you don't need any forms. For your partnership, you're going to need a partnership agreement, right? Each one of these, all of the entities that I talked about, you can get an EIN number for. Even as a sole proprietorship, you can get an EIN, and you don't have to use your own social security number, although everything is still going to be based upon your own credit. But if you don't want to give out your social, you can get an EIN as well. And then for an LLC, you need what's called articles of organization, which when you form, that's what you're going to get. That's going to be the paperwork that the state gives you when you first form. And then just as a side, because I don't think I put this in a separate slide, each state, like I mentioned, when you go to their website, they usually have their business entities on there. Each of them is different to form, and it may be different types of requirements that you need. So it could be a little bit time consuming and confusing. However, it does exist there. If you go to irs.gov, you can get an EIN number. Don't let anyone charge you for an EIN number. It's free. So make sure if you're ever doing it on your own that you go to irs.gov. And then you're going to get a filing receipt. Some states have it, some states don't have it, but if you do get it, make sure you hold on to it. Like I said, for LLCs, you need an operating agreement, and you might need resolution. So like if you're doing any type of business transaction, whoever you're doing it with, if it's like a bank or anyone, they want to know that you have authority to make that decision for the company. And that's what a resolution is. It's basically just having, or consent. Basically just having something in writing saying, yep, I'm authorized to do this on behalf of the business, and this is my position for the business. And then for an S-Corp, you're going to have a certificate of formation or articles. It's called different things in different states. But that's basically, again, the paper that you get when you form the business, an EIN, filing receipt. And then for a corporation or an S-Corp, you have bylaws, which is different from an operating agreement, but it serves the same function. It's basically going to detail how you're going to run the company, how decisions are made, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see. Oh, and that was it. So I'm going to open it up for questions because I know you have tons. Where do I go for these questions?
So you can go into the webinar chat.
Okay.
And then the Q&A section.
Let me see.
So one of them said, is it true that sole proprietorship gets audited the most by the IRS?
Okay. Yes, because you don't have any, basically you don't have any requirements to prove. And you know what? You can't really write off a lot of things when you're in a sole proprietorship. So I'm not sure if that would be the one that gets most audited, but I would say between that and at-home businesses get audited the most.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody said, what's the benefit of adding your children as members to the LLC?
Okay. So one benefit was that you could give them, ownership to the business gradually as they grow, or as you feel fit that you want to, give them ownership interest. But also adding them gives you another layer of protection, because now you're not just one, you're two. And when you have two individuals or multiple member LLC, it's harder or less likely that the courts would ever try to pierce your corporate veil, which means go through you to get to your assets if the business didn't have assets for a particular lawsuit or debt or something like that. So it's another layer. So remember when I said you should have a bank account, you should have your documents, you should, make sure you're running the business properly. Also having a multiple member helps to prevent any sort of going through your business to get to you.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And Kendra said, I just applied for an LLC with myself and my husband. Can I go back and add my children?
Yes, you can. So what you can do is you can amend your paperwork. So I don't know if you have an operating agreement. If you don't, you should. In the operating agreement, you would state that your child is also an owner of the company. And if, say, you already, have your paperwork in place, you could just amend it and say whose interest did it come from. So say, for instance, you and your husband already have 50-50 ownership. You would have to say, yours was reduced by how much and his was reduced by how much, or vice versa, to make up your child's percentage. But you can change it, yes.
And how easy is that? Just would you just add that to your operating agreement? So just add an addendum to your operating agreement?
Yes. Yeah, that doesn't have to be recorded, and It just depends on the state. If the state requires to have that information, most of the states don't require to have who is the actual owners. You're basically just starting the entity, and your paperwork is going to determine who the owners are.
All right, guys, this is some awesome information from Sabine. I love how you simplify it. You keep it very simple. It's some complicated topics, but you simplify it. So what other questions?
So Ebony said, does your LLC need to have a separate address besides your home?
So it should be, it doesn't have to, but it should, because it's public information. So usually it's able to be found on your state's website, or someone could request the information from your state. And therefore, if you don't want them to know where you live, you should have a separate address. What I usually do is you could either use a post office box if that particular post office allows you to use the street address, because on the website you can't. For the state registration, you typically can't use a PO box.
Yep.
Some post offices will allow you to use the street address and use the PO box as like the suite
That's
number.
what we do.
Yeah.
So you got some people who they investigate and they try to find out where you live and all type of craziness. So
exactly.
Don't put your home address on it.
Yeah, we use you can do like mailbox, etc., or postal. What is it?
Postal connection,
things like that actually give you a physical address.
Yeah.
For your PO box.
For your PO box. I see. Dottie McDowell has her hand raised.
Can you click allow to talk? Dottie, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, go ahead. Jump in with your question.
Okay, so I live in Shiloh, Illinois, which is just right across the river from St. Louis, Missouri, and I conduct business in both states.
Okay.
And I'm just trying to figure out what you would recommend as far as creating an LLC so that I can do business in both without like duplicating my efforts and having to do double work.
Okay, so what you're gonna do is start the LLC within your own state, and then in Missouri, right? So Missouri is the other state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in Missouri, what you're going to do is do a certificate of authority, right? So
Okay.
Certificate of authority, that means you basically have authority to do business in that state as well, but you still have just one business entity.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, that was something I didn't know you could do.
Yeah, you can.
Can you only do that for neighboring states?
Yeah, well, no, it's for any state. I mean, if you're buying real estate, I would say, unless it's your parent company, I would say just open up another LLC. But if it's for, like, say, a business that that doesn't need to be separate, like it's the same functioning business, you just want the right to do business in that state so that if any issues arise, you're legit within that state. It usually costs the same, though, as starting an entity. But if that's not what you need to do, then you shouldn't start a new entity. You should just get authority to do business in the state.
Oh, gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
Tommy said, for rental properties, is there a certain amount we should keep under one LLC? I've heard 3 to 5, and I've heard to keep them all separate so you cannot get sued on your other properties.
Yeah, I usually say to keep them all separate. However, if you don't have a lot of equity in each particular property, or yeah, I would say the only time I would say that it's okay to have multiple is if you don't have a lot of equity, because if they sue you, or they seek to sue you, they would see you don't have a lot of equity, and it's probably not worth it. But if you do have equity, I would say to keep them separate.
That's good stuff.
You from New York with the $1 million houses, so
Right.
you will be coming for those.
They come for those.
Just like those Boston properties.
Yeah.
For real. Someone said, so I have my home address currently, Ebony. Can I change it? So you have your home address on your LLC. Can she change it?
Yes. It's probably going to be like something called like a certificate of change or something like that. And you should probably be able to find it on your state's website. And you're basically just going to say you want to change your address from this to this. They probably charge you between $30 and $60 or something like that. And you can.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
We had to do one on one of our LLCs too, from our home address that I think it was our very first LLC that we did. And we later had to go back, and I think it was called like a certificate of change or something. Okay. Someone said I used a cheap virtual address initially when I first started, but I changed it to my home address because DMV wouldn't accept the virtual address. Mm-hmm. And my focus was building business credit. But now that I have an 80 Paydex, I'm thinking I should switch it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say switch it, because you don't just for safety. You don't want anyone to know where you actually live.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Dag, I had a question too, and I read that one and it made me forget.
I'm sure to come back to you.
Shoot. Well, good thing I'll be seeing you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Any other questions, guys, that you guys may have? Dag, I hate when I have a question and it's right there and I keep trying to say, remember. And then as soon as I read it, it went right out the door. Oh, another question. And I'm asking this because I saw it actually in a group.
Okay.
That someone had asked a couple days ago. Okay. Someone asked about starting an LLC. Mm-hmm. Starting an LLC and putting their child's name on the LLC. So she was saying she was, she was starting a business. Okay. And she didn't want someone to know how much she was making. I think because she was on governmental assistance or something, and she didn't want them to know how much she was making in her new business. So she took her name off the LLC and was trying to see if it was legal to put her child's name on the LLC. And I thought that was really interesting.
That sounds like the Social Security put the light bill in
right.
your
So of course somebody was like, I don't think I would have admitted that on, social media, but she was like, well, my accountant said it was okay. But that also made me think like, what about just an LLC with your child on it? With their business.
Do they have to be over 18 to be a member? Or
right. They could be any age, and they could do that. Mm-hmm.
Can they have like, if it's say it's their business and they had maybe 80%, and then us two, we would split the remaining 20%.
Yeah, you could.
Is that possible?
You can certainly do that. For the other question where she's actually running the business and she just wants to put her child so they don't know it's her, I find that to be too risky, because if they find out, it basically they know that you're not the one, your child has nothing to do with it, or is not in any way, is just a way for you to mask that identity. I don't think that would fly. Technically, it's not illegal, but I think that if there was an issue that they needed to get to you, they would not like that.
So, check with your accountant and your attorney.
Right.
Yeah, you gotta check with
all of this.
Always check with both. But as far as your child starting a business, or you co-owning a business with your child, or you having your child on yours, as long as the intentions are good, I think that's fine, or that's good.
Someone said, who can sign up to open the bank account? An LLC question.
So as long as you have your documents, like your operating agreement, who says who the owners are, and then you have that resolution that says you can open up a bank account. Basically, paperwork that you're putting in writing, the bank usually will accept that to open up your business. And you bring the documents that you use to form the business.
Someone said, is there a link for consults with Sabine if we have need of an attorney later?
Yeah, so I didn't put my website up here. Where can I put that, in the chat?
Yeah, just put it in the chat and everybody will have that.
And Sabine also has a do-it-yourself. Is it a do-it-yourself LLC course?
Yeah, so it's like a webinar, really, a 2-part webinar, I would say. It has a lot of what I spoke about, maybe a little bit more to what I spoke about today. And then the second part walks you through how to do it yourself. And you also get some forms, you get sample operating agreements, and it's 11 states that I give you these documents for. Operating agreements and form startup minutes and stuff like that to get you started.
So how can they get access to that information as well? Is that a separate link, or would they just go to?
Yeah, it's a separate link, but hold on. I'm giving you my email address and then the link. You don't have the link, Krystal, do you?
Let me see. Here, go into my email.
All right, let me end my show. And then I'm sharing. Then I can go look for it. To put that up. Sorry, people.
We will find. Okay, I have it.
Do it yourself.
You have it? Okay. Cool.
And the reason why I like the do-it-yourself as well, so when we started out, we did all of our LLCs ourselves.
Okay.
And then I actually, I did another one for one of our companies not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, I got tired of waiting on our attorney who usually does them, and he was kind of backed up.
Okay.
Closing, so I said, forget it, I'll just go ahead and do it myself, and I did it, which was really easy.
Okay.
Once you know what you're doing. I think I just forgot like one form.
Okay.
So and then I forgot the number, like it was like a 44 or something, type, some number 44 type form or something. I know I got a 4 in it.
Okay.
So I got to kind of remember that and go back. And it was a separate form that you had to fill out if you were planning on doing something.
Okay.
So I think I still have to do that. That's why I don't like doing these LLCs. Because I be all over the place.
So do it yourself or hire an expert.
Absolutely.
It's really up to you.
And if you have something walking you through it, that's the perfect scenario.
Right.
If
Yeah.
you have something to say, hey, listen, this is what you fill out. This is how you fill this form out.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that. So I'd already hit Sabine up like a couple of days ago. I said, hey, listen, we'll be launching our next business.
Yeah, like 3 LLCs we're launching this year.
Right. I said, so as soon as I get all of our numbers, I'm going to send this over to you so we can get this next LLC popping.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so I noticed that a lot of people, I didn't want it to be the reason why they don't get started. You know what I mean? So I was like, let me find a way to teach everybody how to do it.
It's a formality. It's like, but most people don't have experience doing it. But once you get this formality out of the way, you can move on with building your business,
Right.
which is what we all want to do.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate your time a lot. So just so you guys know, anyone who's in real estate, if you're looking to grow your real estate business or generate more leads, we do have a course on driving for dollars and using Deal Machine. So if you check any of our social medias, you can check out that course. So if you have questions on it, you can set up a call with one of our team members to learn about that program.
Hold on 1 second. One more question. Candace had asked, if your original operating agreement has a C Corp election, can you change it to an S Corp?
Yeah, so it's going to be just another one of those what we call amendments, where you would state that the members agreed to be taxed as an S Corp, and then you do it. But also speak to your accountant on when to do it, because it's I know that there's something about timing when it comes to the election. So because you're already formed, just speak to your accountant about when to actually pull that trigger, but you can change it.
Oh, that was really good to know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So a lot of people ask us as well, what's the next seminar we're going to be going to, or next time we're going to be doing an event. So our next event for Krystal and I is going to be at Wholesaling Elite Live 2020. That's going to be in Atlanta, February 6th through the 7th. Wow. So if you guys want to meet us in person, we would love to meet a lot of you guys in person. I know Earn Your Leisure is doing a big event in Atlanta in a couple weeks. I'm not sure you're going to be there, Sabine?
I really want to. It's the weekend of the 25th, I believe, or something.
25th, yeah. I think Max is going to be there, so that's going to be leading up to the We Live event. So, but what's that?
Are you guys going to be there too?
I'm not sure yet, depending on our travel schedule.
Yeah, because we'll be in. We'll actually be together tomorrow, and then we'll be in Cali Wednesday through Sunday, and then the next week we'll be actually somewhere else. I got to look at the schedule. So we're looking at it. I'm trying to see if I can push some stuff around, but it may not happen.
I got you.
Especially with these children.
Yeah.
So the next webinar, guys, is going to be on getting your credit right.
Right.
So one of the reasons she married me is because I got that Halle Berry credit. Yep. Right? She's seen my credit report. So y'all need, everybody knows credit is king. You think cash is king, but credit is really king. So we're going to have an expert, Kiara Martin, come in and talk about getting your personal credit right for the new year. So make sure y'all tune in for that.
Yep, that information will go up this week as well. Thank you so much, Sabine.
Thank you, Sabine.
We so appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.